Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting from the Pinos Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida, riot free. I've got the real Dr. V with me tonight on the stream. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I probably need to have you fill out a prescription of medication for me, which I'll talk about in a moment, because I need to make a confession to everybody. As drug-free as I am and the clean living guy I am, I definitely need a shot of LSD to discuss this next movie that we're going to be going over, which is 1978's Deathsport, starring David Carradine, some Playboy chick, and of course Richard Lynch, who we are going to be talking about as well, and a really, really horrible, loosely based Roger Corman knockoff of Deathrace 2000 from 1975. This movie, Doctor, is I could say it's a tough watch, but then we have movies that are pretty bad that really upset me, whereas this one didn't, because it's as B, low budget as you can get. And here's the thing. My initial confession, with being a huge David Carradine fan from the TV show Kung Fu, one of my favorite shows of all time, the fact that he's in here does not make this show even better. What makes this show good is the fact that it's so bad it's good. So yeah, I just don't know what people would expect if we say, yeah, you've got to go watch this movie, because it's a different viewing experience. That's my initial thoughts on it. What about you?
Like I said, this movie actually it was a box office. Actually, I take that back. It wasn't a box office flop. It had a budget under $150,000, and it came back with $400,000. Box office alone. Claudia Jennings is the Playboy Playmate from 1969 or
69 and 1970, I think.
Yeah,
maybe even Hustler as well. Those are adult magazines that used to get published for people to look at nudes for you young people that don't know what real porn was back in the day.
Yes, so this has Richard Lynch, I believe, was either the sheriff or the bad guy. I think he's the president, whatever it was at the time, the king, whatever. Anyway, and like it's supposed to be like the 30th century, where they have a death sport, where they capture people, and just for the sport entertainment, the prisoners are thrown into a thing where they basically you're allowed to have a sword, or if you can get a gun from one of the soldiers. Basically, it's like it's Gladiator. It's Gladiator. Yeah. It's motorcycle gladiators. So basically, take the movie Gladiator, give them dirt bikes, and you got Caesar up there, or whatever his name is, or whatever and this guy, he's like the president. He's going crazy as it is. His brain's degenerate from too much radiation. So he basically throws
the neutron wars, sir. Yes, you are correct. So radiation poisoning.
So he throws the doctor into the sport, and the sport as well. The doctor really doesn't have much of a plot here. He's just someone that he's like, we need to warn the people. He's gonna start a new war. We can't survive another war. Blah blah blah. It's like I said, there is a lot of nudity in this. I was surprised. I'm like, hey, what's these little looks like plastic tubing with roll plates, for Christmas lights.
Hold off on that for a moment. Hold off on that. So let's save the best for last.
But anyways, I'm just saying that this movie is like it's so bad. But you gotta realize it's a Roger Corman movie. I would actually rather go watch the actual Deathrace 2000. To me, that was more entertaining. You at least had Sylvester Stallone in there, playing a cocky guy named Machine Gun Joe with two Tommy's guns, and he's got two babes always on his shoulder. It's David Carradine also starred in that film as well. But this was kind of like, why did we need this? I mean, this seemed like it would have been like better off just being like the movie Gore. If you've ever heard of that one, that was another where a kid gets transported into a barbarian time.
All right, so, but for the movie, here's the thing, and you say, well, why do we need it? In the 70s, you had a lot of feature films that would play, and a lot of films still were playing, obviously, in drive-in theaters. So sometimes to have a double feature, a lot of studios would produce something that's, less than complementary to the main picture, and it would be like the B picture, and that's where kind of the term comes from. You got your A side on a single of records that would be played, then you had your B sides, and so that whole term knowledge is kind of gone away in our current language, but it's very legitimate. So I think this movie was made for it. And Roger Corman was known not necessarily for having the highest level of quality control, let's say, in his films. It was, hey, I make stuff super cheap. I do it super fast. I make it on time, in budget. And we've talked about how that is a viable business model. And to your point, this movie did turn a bit of a profit. And of course, VCR rentals were starting to be a thing. But this movie is so cheap. You brought something up pre-screen that I thought was interesting. I was going to ask you about here in a moment. This movie is so cheap that when a motorcycle person has an accident, the motorcycle just explodes. Or if one of the contestants, the combatants, I should say, is firing at somebody else, there's literally no muzzle fire, no flash, no blinking light, nothing from the guy's gun to the other guy. It's just a bunch of quick cuts and motorcycles where you see them being filmed, where the body's not even being thrown there. The motorcycles are just kind of like, falling and laying off on their side. It is so bad that way.
There's a lot of synthwave music in this movie too. It's just kind of creepy, like in certain scenes. But let's talk about the guns, the laser guns they have. They look like giant, like the 100 mega luminous flash spotlights you'd use with cops use on there and all. And,
exactly. No, that's
and when they turn it on, the person all of a sudden just digitally turns red and just disappears. They're erased forever. They're just vaporized. It's like, and I could see, yes, you're running on a cheap budget, so maybe that's easier to do than actually just use actual guns with ammo, because that costs money too. The fire blanks, even just to have the gun and the when the motorcycles are driving, they sound like TIE fighters. Go. I was like,
it's really eerily. It seems like a blatant ripoff, doesn't it?
I want someone to play the stuff, dude. I need Star Wars scored behind this. When they're driving, the TIE fighter, and I want the engineer blast go pew pew. I want someone to do that. Recut it.
I think the score is actually interesting because it fits for the movie, but it's kind of like too loud, or just the mix isn't good, I should say. It's like a lot of things every today are overproduced or leveled at a certain way where just everything sounds like noise, even though it might be clean. It's not great, but it definitely has a very early synth wave type vibe to it, where like if you would go to a laser show at the Orange County Convention Center, or actually I should say the Gordon Barnett Park, where we used to have our yearly carnival, they would always have like a laser show in it, and they would have really bad laser pictures, but they'd play this weird music and stuff, and it would be in that. It's like, okay, and there's like a lot of synth warble and stuff, which at the time in the late 70s, super cutting edge. And in all honesty, it's kind of cool actually, some of the atmospheric effects it gives you. And of course they shot it on about 2 acres worth of land, plus an indoor set. I mean, and that's all you're getting from this movie. But
now,
what's that?
Did you recognize some of the other actors in here? The guy who played the doctor is actually he's from Dallas. He played Jeremy Wendell on the original run of Dallas from 81 to 89. And then we got another guy in there, Hard Boiled Haggerty, a wrestler from NWA.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't catch that reference, because you're right. This movie, even though it's David Carradine, who after Kung Fu was super mega hot, had like this big picture deal to do, and he was getting ready to do a Bruce Lee movie called Circle of Iron, but Bruce Lee, of course, died, and he ended up doing it. And I remember Circle of Iron a lot. So the thing with David Carradine is he ended up doing a lot of trash films. I mean, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but a lot of low rent, low budget stuff, but he liked to work, and he's got a lot of credits under his belt for a ton of stuff like this that nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah, so this guy, Hard Boiled Haggerty, he actually played the Detroit Lions back in 1950.
Yeah.
And then he went on to
when everybody was kayfabe, where you pretend like it was all real.
Yeah, after he retired from wrestling, this guy went on. He was on Adam 12, Kung Fu. He was also in Get Smart, Starsky and Hutch, Columbo, Beretta, Happy Days, The Bob Newhart Show, Love Boat, Incredible Hulk, and Crazy Like a Fox. I mean, this guy was like around, a lot. And this is what I thought Hulk Hogan would still be doing, even though he only did like Thunder in Paradise and I think one other show after he retired. But it was common back then, because a lot of wrestlers would wrestle and then they'd get start spots in movies. Like that one guy, the guy who was with Chuck Norris. What was the one where the guy stopped the bug, punched it? The guy who looked like he looked like Odd Job, but it wasn't.
Oh, Harold Tanaka or whatever.
Yeah,
Odd
yeah,
Job.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah,
So
I was going to say, you bring up a pretty interesting point about the people acting in this film, because again, it is a David Carradine film, and the main bad dude who's just there with radiation poisoning, nobody cares about him. Richard Lynch and David Carradine both actually play their lines 100% completely straight. And Richard Lynch, I want to back up a little bit because I want to tie some of a couple things I think make this film interesting and might explain some of the weirdness while you're watching. So this guy, Richard Lynch, there's a TV show in the early 80s, only lasted maybe 6-8 episodes, called The Phoenix, with Judson Scott, who ended up doing a little bit on Wrath of Khan, Star Trek II, as like the second in charge. Beautiful California blonde-haired dude. Phoenix was a very interesting show. We've talked about covering it here, even though nobody's ever saw it or probably remembers it. But it's a short-lived, pretty interesting series. Richard Lynch plays like the bad CIA guy out to get him. And Richard Lynch, I looked and went, oh, does he have like chicken pox, pock marks on his face? Because this is the time, in the late 70s, early 80s, where people might have had something back when they were younger, and you could see it when they're older. Not quite as prevalent today. But what I found out by Richard Lynch was that he, in his probably early 20s, I think was in Central Park, big into LSD, which is a big thing at the time. And he lit himself on fire, and like his entire body is almost completely burned. And of course, he suffered a lot. His face is horribly scarred from it. And you see that. That's why he always played the heavy. But then he actually used that as an opportunity to kind of get off drugs and everything else too. And that was like a big thing later in life. Never knew that before. Saw Lynch in tons of stuff in the 80s. And if you grew up seeing any 80s films that we've talked about on Kicking It or the Extreme Classics or any other shows that we do here on the Extreme Movie Show, you'll hear his name again. But I thought his performance in Kane's was actually really, really good. The way they would deliver those lines. They've got charisma, and it's very prevalent. And when you look at Carradine, he's high the entire time. And then Dennings, the stripper, or the Playboy bunny, excuse me, she's completely coked out of her mind or on weed or drunk or whatever. I mean, and that's the whole story behind this movie, is that they shot it in like a couple weeks, and just about every single person in every single scene, for the most part, is completely under the influence of something, whether it's weed, LSD, cocaine, alcohol, some combination of it. And that was just what made this a really weird shoot, because they had to go back and do a lot of these scenes you were talking about, the motorcycle chases and everything else, and the editing for the sound. So it's amazing to me that this little low budget thing that actually was successful somewhat financially, they were able to produce, because you're right. They had a lot of B-level names in here that you're like, oh, this is the person from so-and-so. So it's, while people can say it's garbage, it's trash, there was legitimate acting chops in this movie, actor-wise, I would say. Yeah, I just wanted to share that with you, because Carradine's a huge LSD guy, huge pot guy. He had a very eccentric lifestyle off camera, and you could definitely see how these guys were taking everything so seriously while they're acting. But when you go back and you watch it, you go, man, they're completely out of their gourd making this movie. And for some reason, that helps, because this movie is like an LSD trip.
Like I said, it's Roger Corman. Roger Corman I would say he's a guy who loved filming the movie Moonraker and wants to make every movie as bad as Moonraker.
Sir, I take offense to that. Moonraker is completely entertaining. Well, actually, as far as the movie goes, I do want to bring up one point about it, because yeah, you have these neutron wars. You got three classes of people. Here's what was interesting, that I almost wanted to put this in the sci-fi category, but not really. And it was this. It's explained a little bit early on in the film that, okay, here's the situation. You get a little bit of a voiceover, and you understand what the setup is with the race. But they've eliminated the death penalty, no capital punishment. So if you're a criminal, you can get conscripted, for lack of a better term, to be in this race. And of course, pretty much everybody dies except for the one person that gets freedom. I thought that was pretty interesting from a libertarian perspective, because a lot of libertarians don't believe in the death penalty. That's not to say all do, but I found it very fascinating that, you have different groups of people, not levels, but both, basically everybody kind of agrees to this. And then half the movie is David Carradine and the bunny kind of just talking to each other about we are union, we are one with each other, I heal you as you heal me, and all this philosophical mumbo-jumbo nonsense, which works for the film, by the way. But then the other half, and probably the most interesting part, which you briefly spoke of earlier, is the gratuitous amounts of nudity and actually torture, because this is almost like a torture porn movie if you think about it. A lot of electrocutions, a lot of strobe lights, and multiple scenes of women dancing 100% completely buff naked around stripper poles flowing like wind chimes until they get electrocuted. What did you make of that?
Like I said, this whole thing is just so weird. This movie, but it's like, yeah, you're talking about the girls in the thing. It was just like trippy. I was just like, this is like a movie. If I was 15 years old, I'd be like, holy crap, I gotta hide this from my mom. You want to know I have this? Because I was not expecting that whatsoever. Like, because is this movie like PG or something like that? Or it was it's a.
I don't even know, honestly, to be honest with you. And you know, the ratings different back then meant different things. You could have a lot more nudity back then.
It is rated R. It is rated R, but it's still, it's like, I never would have expected that, and it's just so weird. It's just like, no, okay, I'm like, a lot of times in the movies, like if there were horror movies, there'd be a lot of murder or rape, things, As if another movie that came out this year was I Spread in Your Grave. Perfect example. Those are the movies I expected nudity in. Like, this was like, okay, I expected what we saw when we saw David Carradine kissing the main girl, whatever her name is, you didn't see anything at all. You just saw their shoulders, and that's it, kissing, and that was within a 2-second clip. This is like, we're going to have full-on frontal nudity and hanging like Christmas lights pans. I'm thinking like, okay, what's the point of this? And it's supposed to be like, it's horribly supposed to be, it's like they're electric rods. First, the first girl is thrown in there, and she's like, why am I in here unless she's naked? She doesn't want to be in there, and she gets electrocuted. Well, the pervy guy, David Lynch, is just like, yes, come in here, look, yes, yeah. Get some more lotion and some tissues, I'm thinking like, this is so disgusting. It's like, then the next girl, she's like, well, I'm gonna start dancing, and I'm like, okay, and then guess who kills him? This freaking stripper. She pulls him in. I'm like, why is he ready? Oh my gosh, it's like, and that's how he dies. Is that? It's like, what a waste of a death, man. Like, I want her, like, if the girl grab him, like, to just slit his throat or snap his neck or something like that, or do something, something cool, This is just like, and like the whole point of this, I'm like, who came up with the idea? This is even on LSD. I don't think David Carradine like, yeah, let's have naked girls and just have like little light rods, hanging from the ceiling and just like pretend they're electrical rods. It's like, what?
I disagree totally, especially with David Carradine. I disagree totally about that.
I think David Carradine would probably be Carradine regardless. He'd just be like, am I getting paid? I need money for weed.
So that's pretty much it, really. I mean, the biggest thing I think about this film is that we understand it's low budget. We understand the effects aren't going to be very good. But the fact that, like Richard Lynch, I'm bagging on her, calling her the bunny, but Claudia Jennings, very beautiful woman, doesn't have to be a great actress. We know that. She was more than generous as far as allowing herself to be filmed completely head to toe. And you see this. It's not like you get a quick shot or we're getting teased with, the bra slowly sliding off the shoulder or anything else like that. And some of these things, that's more erotic than sexy. No, full on, she's in there and she's completely uninhibited. And same with the other lady too. So there's definitely a fair amount of that. And in a B movie, there's certain expectations you have. Stupid gore, dumb stuff, maybe nudity. And we've talked this about in the 80s films, that how there was a certain expectation if you were getting a movie that you had to have this, you had to have that. And unfortunately, that didn't mean it was a high quality film. But back then with a B movie, it was kind of given. And I think B movies have kind of fallen by the wayside when it comes to expectations, because honestly, as a B movie, this is enjoyable in its own way. If you understand what a B movie is, the old school type, and you watch it like that way, it's not just a bunch of stuff that's like on Netflix today that's watchable, but not memorable. So yeah, there's certainly an appreciation for being able to watch this and see what they were able to do and almost really pull off a halfway decent movie on such a small budget.
Was also here. I completely forgot she's in here. I was going back and watching some more scenes, and the girl who plays Adrian in here is actually a pinup model from Iger Sancton, Brenda Venus.
She's from, I'm sorry, so from where?
The Iger Sancton with Clint Eastwood.
Oh, Yes.
The brunette with the
yes.
huge tits.
She's well endowed, sir. Let's be PC, okay? A very gorgeous woman, yeah. Well, I don't think the women honestly were objectified in here per se, even though they were tortured. I know that sounds hypocritical, but she's on the good team, the good side. And the Cannibal Mutants who abducted like this little kid they end up getting, nobody really cares. There's just certain parts about this movie that are completely forgettable because you really do watch some interesting scenes. Now, like you said, I sounds like earlier I was bagging on the motorcycle scenes. They look cheesy, they look bad, but you know what? There's a lot of them, and I guarantee you, anybody that's a fan of Bullet, Fast and the Furious, we just did Smokey and the Bandit recently. This has got the most destruction of all automobiles I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, in all honesty, because you go in here and every single motorcycle gets blown up about 14 times. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I love the unnecessary explosions. It's just like, okay, we're gonna blow up this one of those. I'm like, it would have been more fun. You see guys getting impaled by like spears, like a sword running through, the blood coming out. Something you'd see like in a Indiana Jones, movie, like Temple of Doom, perfectly. When you see guys getting ripped apart, that I like. This was like, oh, we need those motorcycles. Here they come up, and then we cut, and it shows them like they split between their swords, and that's it. You just see the guys laying there. They're like that, and there's a little bit of paint on top of the tip of the sword. It's like, what? I was like, come on. For being rated R, there's only rated R for the nudity. That's it. But David Carradine even said this movie, he said it was horrible, and in his movie, basically, he never recovered. His career never recovered from this movie. It's such a blunder.
It's hard to believe, if that's 100% true, because, like I say, he's been known to be a very strong personality when it comes to dealing with stuff. And some people said that in Kung Fu, that's one of the reasons why the Kung Fu TV show ended, was because he was just not necessarily high maintenance, but very difficult to deal with, like it had gotten to his head too much. And, if you go back and see old interviews and read up about him and stuff, because I'd been a fan since I was a very young kid. It's one of the first shows I ever watched. It was definitely true.
I have a question for you. There was supposed to be a sequel for this, but it was never made. It's called Death World. Would you have watched it, sir?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Also, the soundtrack in here is also there were guitar riffs from Jerry Garcia.
Another big LSD guy. Now let me talk a little bit about LSD before we get to the final fight. LSD was such a big thing back then. I had college professors talking about how wonderful LSD was and how it allows everybody to be creative, because supposedly if you microdose it, take it in small amounts, it's supposed to help. So actually, the CIA, of course, was involved with mind control stuff and LSD, trying to see whether or not it could be a truth serum and other stuff. It's kind of made a resurgence, in the 80s and 90s with, ecstasy and other stuff now. But back then, it was so cutting edge because apparently you could take it. Most of the time, you could have somewhat of a pleasant trip, and it was supposed to really open up your brain to consciousness. And in movies like Beyond the Black Rainbow, which I discussed some months ago on the show here, there's this whole drug sort of thing that alludes to opening up the mind and psychic powers and stuff. And a lot of that really came out from the whole hippie movement of the 60s, the underground tests that the government would do on people with drugs, and the whole weaponizing of drugs in a way. So it's kind of interesting because that's where a lot of people on the 70s recognized everybody, had free sex, basically. A lot of morals were considered to be coming down. A lot of people didn't like it, with cocaine and pot and alcohol, even because it took away from the hardcore moral fabric of society that was supposedly, really great in the 50s. And, whether your personal beliefs are, about those kinds of things culturally, that's just a reality of it. So you get something like a bunch of people that, take LSD and they're not harming anybody and they do something, they're going to get kind of weird and make up stuff. And I don't know. I just think that when you get a movie like this and it's got a trippy element to it, it's a part of our culture, because there was a few key people that really got into, like Jefferson Airplane, Jimi Hendrix. I just was talking with you about Jimi Hendrix not too long ago. LSD was a big thing. Supposedly these people on like this unlocked the secrets of the universe in their brain and their mind. They had this real come to Jesus kind of feeling to them, even though it may not be a religious experience. It was so overwhelmingly positive. I don't know how real any of that is. That stuff's not for me, but if you take it, I don't really care. And in this movie, it's just kind of trippy enough where you go, it helps this movie out, because if they didn't have that stuff, I think it would be just a plain out awful movie. And I'm not saying it's a great movie, but for my final thoughts, Doctor, I would say I think it's watchable. I think it's a bad B movie, and by that that's a compliment. We mean it's good. It's worth sitting down watching, especially for Lynch and Carradine alone. I mean, again, you get your gratuitous nudity, your explosions. They have all the things that you would want in a movie, and I think that they tried to do the best they can with what little they had. What about you? What are your final thoughts?
This movie could have been a whole lot better if you actually would have focused more on the fighting. Actually, I'd say the fighting, if you would have actually increased it more, and this, instead of like they have the swords there. I see a lot of people use the guns. I wanted more, let's say, like what was it, Conan, or what was the other B movies they always had? They always had the people using the swords and the barbarian stuff. I like more of that stuff. This was just like, we're gonna have people on motorcycles. We're gonna pretend it's the 30th century. It's apocalyptic world, and just like the dialogue to me was just horrible in this whole entire movie. I mean,
it's so bad. It's awesome. Yeah.
Focus on the dialogue and get a whole new. And you can keep the action scenes all you want to, but like the whole thing is like
Blade.
It's like what did he say? It's like, we are union, either break or die.
Oh yeah. It's completely batshit insane.
Like, don't touch the door, and it turns blue, and he's like, and he breaks the camera. He's like, "Screw you!" Like the prisoner. It's like, I was like, seriously?
Better effects on a Johnny Quest cartoon than this movie.
or if they want to have it like that, don't have him wearing like the barbarians. Like, why does he have to wear like just a line cut and like a shoulder pad? It's like, give him a better outfit. Let him like
no.
Less barbarian.
If you read the bonus notes I have for the show, for the outro here, it's about loincloths. Well, we could spend a good 10 minutes talking about how great wearing loincloths are.
I know you have a thing for David Carradine, but the rest of us don't want to see him in a loincloth.
Loincloths, sir. The only person that did it better besides him and, say, Schwarzenegger in the 80s was Cameo from the jazz group, because he would wear a codpiece everywhere in public. And that's just a glorified loincloth to me, but it meant something in African tribal villages. It's true. I'm just saying. Loincloth is awesome. You mean to tell me you would not want to star half naked in a movie just wearing a loincloth and swinging a sword? I know I would.
I don't know. I mean, we've already seen with Conan, we've seen with Tarzan. It's like, on the plane, it's like, can we just give him a shirt? Come on, really? Does he have to wear it?
No, full-on loincloth, uncombed hair, everything. You have to go wild. You have to go all natural. Well, the final scene that you mentioned there with the swords is interesting, because if you go back and you watch it, they're supposed to be quote-unquote crystal swords, I believe. Yeah. And when they fight, David Carradine has gracefulness about him, physically about him, and I thought Richard Lynch, except for the one or two really obvious stunt double scenes, did a respectable job moving around too. And they have this battle and this fight, and there's a glorious beheading at the end, right when the movie ends. But the thing is, it's true, you don't see the swords ever literally touch, and that's because I think they only had two of them, and so therefore they couldn't afford one of them accidentally getting broke or chipped or whatever. So there's this quick cutting and going back and forth and circling each other, and you're like, this is awful, yet so wonderfully entertaining. It's better than the people doing 100 strokes, not getting tired and bashing each other, say like in James Bond, where they're doing the fencing scene with Madonna, which is just atrocious. It's nothing even like that. So
I mean, this is, what was the other one? Was it Zardoz, the one with Sean Connery? Yes.
Yep.
This is right up there. I don't know which one's worse at this point. But when it comes to the sword and stuff, it's like the guy they probably only had two swords. Yes, you're correct. And the guy who probably made, he's like, you guys gotta be careful with that. I can't do it. I can't make any more materials. My mom's being a bitch, and I can't make any more. So I'm thinking at the time, it's like spend more money. They spend all the money on the actors. And the gasoline for the motorcycles. Everything else was just like, yeah, we're gonna this copy from Star Wars. Use the sound bites from Star Wars.
I agree totally. Yeah, and the thing too with that is that like I say, in the 70s, you had a lot of the whole psychic thing going on, along with UFOs, more interest in the occult. and that was just a part of it. So sometimes watching these old trippy movies, some of them just don't seem to make sense within your eyes. Yeah, they were probably high when they made it. You go, it makes perfect sense, and it gets to be great. Whereas, like I say, people have watched Beyond the Black Rainbow, or even more recently, you and I have talked about Mandy with Nick Cage, made by the same director, Cosmo Panatos. Interesting, and I kind of like that druggy element to it. There's definitely a subculture when it comes to like druggy films and those types of things, and I'm sure we're going to be covering some more of those a little bit later. So would you tell people to watch it or not watch it? I say watch it.
I say watch it, and watch with a friend, and then every time they do something cringy, take a shot.
They could have made this a 1 hour movie and it'd be really good, actually, if they cut some stuff out. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Good evening, Jim. I see that you're there in chat. If you haven't seen this movie, I think, Jim, that it may be playing actually on Amazon Prime for free right now if you're a subscriber.
I'm just glad that my copy wasn't worn out in the part where they had to get the girls naked. It's usually what happens with these movies.
Bless women who are naturally beautiful and not necessarily enhanced, and not that I have anything against that either, but just uninhibited, and that's the word I'd like to use for this. It's an uninhibited film. That's the way to describe it. Okay, everybody, thanks for listening, Doctor. Thanks for joining me tonight. We will see you guys shortly at the Top 10 Tuesday at 8 p.m. EST, where we're going to be doing, surprise, surprise, Top 10 Films of 1978. Good night.
Night, kids.